to the Romans, the gladiators were the equivalent of human garbage. Surprised? Today, the Roman gladiators are one of the most famous symbols of the era, but it wasn't always like that. Here's what it was like to be a gladiator in ancient Rome. Before we start though, you have to do one thing: forget everything you know. The gladiators were completely different from what we think. When people usually imagine gladiators, they think of shining armor in the sun, a fight to the death, and crowds cheering. None of that is true, most of the time at least. For one thing, being a gladiator wasn't exactly the most respected profession. They were criminals or slaves turned into stage clowns, meant to put on a show for the entertainment of those watching them. They were way down on the social pecking order. People usually didn't enter this field unless they had a death wish. Some did sign up willingly for their 5 minutes of fame. But these people were very small in number, at least at first, because they'd be lucky if they made it out of it alive. But because of their value as a public spectacle, gory though they were, gladiatorial battles were rarely to the death. While it's true that the more blood, the better, the practice of watching people die in the amphitheater was reserved for other prisoners, like those thrown to the lions. Because yeah, that happened. But the point of gladiators fighting was to perform, not to kill each other. If one of them was seriously wounded, or if the fight went on for long enough that the audience started to get bored of it, it would be stopped. The gladiators were expensive to house, feed, and train up to the point where they could be let out into the arena, so it was probably in the best interests of their promoters to see them live. Not that it helped for very long though. Most gladiators never made it past their mid-20s, and 1 in 10 matches ended in death anyway. And even if the fight did end in a stalemate, if the emperor was watching, it was on his whims who got to live and who didn't. But the kind of life they lived when not out in the arena might have made early death a blessing anyway. Everyday life. The buildings where the gladiators were kept were not much different than prisons. The warriors fought only a few times a year, but when they were not facing bloodshed they would be kept in shackles all day long. The fortress had only one gate leading out, and the cells where they were kept were only 3 square meters big and had to be shared between 2 people. They ate a diet high in carbs and low in animal proteins. Most of the time, they just ate barley and beans. This mostly vegetarian diet was used to build a layer of fat around the midsection, for extra padding against the sharp weapons. Because why waste money on armor when you could just do that, right? They were not allowed to ever speak at mealtimes, and the schedule was grueling. Every day, for hours they practiced with wooden swords weighted to be twice as heavy as real metal ones. Muscles were built to the point that bones were deformed. By all accounts, it was inhumane. This was how the Romans decided to punish their enemies and their criminals. Gladiators were the absolute property of the lanista, their coach, who could treat them as he pleased. Freemen who joined the ranks also had to accept whatever command they gave. But all of this came with a bright side. Survive for about 5 years, and they'd be set free, no strings attached. And while that was going on, they had 3 square meals a day and a level of protection. Not just that, but they were also allowed to keep any winnings they earned from a fight. Depending on the crime, this might not be the worst deal in the world. Some of them even ended up being sex symbols and celebrities in the lower classes of Roman society, with dolls carved out to look like specific gladiators being sold. People even bought perfumes made out of their sweat. It's not the best feeling to know society still hasn't progressed past things like that. Today, gladiators and the Colosseum have become the biggest symbols of Roman civilization, so it's surprising to know that back then, they were considered social pariahs and lived such difficult lives. Makes you wonder what we'll be remembered for, doesn't it? Would you have chosen the life of a gladiator if you had the chance? Let us know in the comments, and if you liked this video, make sure to like and subscribe. That's all.